Hello and welcome to another episode of the Economic Times Cutting Chai Stories, an initiative by ET Edge. I am Ashwani Mishra, bringing to you conversations with CXOs over a cup of chai as we discuss and go through the roller coaster journey of some of India's most accomplished enterprise leaders. We try to find out their unique leadership style, career experiences, personal struggles, sources of inspiration, and other such engaging topics. Joining me today is a very special guest, Managing Director and CEO of Tata AIA Life Insurance, Naveen Tahilyani. Welcome, Naveen, to Cutting Chai Stories.
Thank you. Thank you, Ashwini. Delighted to be here.
Naveen, can you take us through your childhood, your schooling, and lessons that you've learned early on that have stayed with you till date?
My childhood was in many cities. Um, I was born in Delhi, and then preschool itself, because my dad had a transferable job. Uh, I have some very vague recollections of Pune and Ahmedabad because I
Right.
was very young. But I got introduced to Pune and Ahmedabad very early on, and then I started my schooling back in Delhi. But I also then grew up in Lucknow, which is where I did my middle school. And then I did my high school from Chennai. Big thing I would say about my childhood is I got to see the diversity of India. And if I may extrapolate my childhood a little further into my college and business school education as well, I ended up doing my college in Chennai and business school in Ahmedabad. Uh, at which point of time my parents had moved to Kolkata. So I think I can confidently say that before I started my work life, I had touched north, south, east, and west of the country. And I think it was amazing to see. It's we talk about the diversity of India and how it is not a country; it's a continent. It has different cultures, different languages, different people. I must tell you that experiencing it as a kid, when you go from a place like Lucknow, which is known for its tehzeeb and manners, to Chennai, where people don't speak Hindi. This is, I'm
True.
talking of 1987,
Right.
when people don't speak Hindi at all. And I remember I had my favorite cycle, which landed from a truck, because all our stuff came from Lucknow in a big truck or two trucks, I don't remember. And I took out my cycle and the tires were flat, and I was kind of going around trying to find a bicycle shop to inflate the tires. And I found one and I said, "Mujhe hawa bharni hai." And the guy looked at me as if, I was from planet Mars or something. So, you kind of learn and see so much about the diversity of India. You learn to adapt, you learn to see different styles, different cultures, and you pick up a lot of things along the way. So I think I am who I am because of the diversity of India. And it has kind of made me a little bit more adaptable, a little bit more understanding, a little bit less dogmatic, and a little bit less certain about myself, which is good because, you should always be open to what is out there. And I think that is a gift I carry from my childhood.
Very well said. So those lessons stay with you for life, Naveen, I believe, in a way. You've touched upon the experiences in living in different cities, Naveen. I believe you did your BTech from IIT Madras and then went on to do your PGDBM from IIM Ahmedabad, right?
Correct.
How has your upbringing, impacted your attitude towards life, both personal and professional?
As I said, growing up in different cities makes you a little bit more adaptable. So I think in that sense, professionally and personally, I am open to what is out there. I'm open to exploring possibilities rather than getting bogged down with what I think is a way of doing things. Right? There are many ways of doing things, and in that sense, harnessing the power of the collective mind, harnessing the people that you work with, teamwork rather than individual leadership is what I have come to rely on a lot. Because I think I truly believe this. I truly believe this that when you put people together from diverse backgrounds, smart people, committed people who bring different ideas to the table, who bring different,
True.
kind of thought process to the table, I think what you get uh, coming out of that process is something which is, better than the sum of the parts. And however bright an individual leader is, I don't think an individual leader is a substitute for a terrific team with a variety of backgrounds. So I think that is one big thing I would say I kind of try to bring to my professional life on a daily basis. The other thing I would just say, just as a background from my education, which is engineering and then MBA, PGDBM, by the way, at
That's
least
what this got.
when we passed out, it's still a diploma, but actually it's I would submit it's a proper MBA. It makes you a little bit more analytically oriented, I think. And I think there is a lot of space in today's business world for using analytics for decision making. I think there is always intuition, there is always gut instinct on top. There is always space for, okay, what does your gut tell you and what is in your heart. But I think to the extent that it needs to be grounded in the reality of data and analytics, that is one other thing I carry. So I think those are probably my two takeaways from my early days.
Right. So a mix of the gut feeling and the tech that is around you. A good combination of having both of them. You started your career with McKinsey and Company, Naveen, and you worked there for almost 17 and a half years, if I'm not wrong. Learnings or experiences that you've gathered by working there for such a long duration of time, and how has that enabled you what you're today?
So look, when you pass out from business school, and I'm talking of 97, this was still very early days, and we were still, I would say, from a job market perspective, in a opportunity constrained environment. McKinsey was clearly the best job on campus, and without too much thought process, you kind of get into this mode that you have to kind of land the best job. And I was fortunate enough to land the best job. If you asked me at that time rationally why was I choosing McKinsey, I couldn't give you a good answer, though of course I had one for the McKinsey guys, which is why they hired me.
Right.
But I must say it has been professionally and personally, an absolutely fantastic journey over almost 18 years. And I say this without any hesitation that, in business school, we had an aura and an understanding of McKinsey which was larger than life. And the one thing I remember is a lot of people came and gave me friendly advice saying, okay, you are joining McKinsey. That's good. There were five of us who got through to McKinsey from campus. And they said, yeah, this is good. But remember, McKinsey is very brutal. It's up and out. And you will be out in 2 years because every 2 years, they kind of purge and you will be looking for a job. And I must say, you feel a little intimidated. It was my first job from campus. You get into a place like McKinsey, which is super special. And I remember I told my dad, I think, you'll have to help me after 2 years find a job. And that
Okay.
was my mindset entering into McKinsey, that I would be lucky if I survived 2 years. And, I didn't survive, but I thrived for almost 18 years. And I think what you realize when you get into a place like McKinsey is it is the most people friendly place on earth, at least for a new joiner. They make you comfortable. The culture is one of supporting you. The culture is one of making each and every individual successful. There is no constraint for opportunity. You're not fighting with your colleagues for going up the ladder. You are basically working on improving yourself to progress and to develop. And I must say, the friends, colleagues, mentors I have from McKinsey stay with me even now. I have some of my closest friends, my closest mentors, my closest mentees from McKinsey. And I think the second thing I would say about McKinsey is that it's a place where, as a consulting firm, they work with some of the best companies in the country or in the world. Actually, I had a very international career with McKinsey. So you get exposure to some of the best companies on their most difficult problems, because these companies don't hire McKinsey to do run of the mill stuff, right? They hire McKinsey to do to look at their most difficult problems. So
Right.
that early on exposure to the best companies on their most difficult problems and direct exposure to the top team, more often than not to the CEOs, also has a way of growing you professionally, which I think no other place can. So both on the personal side and on the professional side, I have a lot to thank McKinsey for. And I must say, I must end on the way in the way that I started. that it is truly, truly a special and fantastic place.
So would you attribute your success, in terms of your work that was there at McKinsey?
I would say, and I have said this openly to a lot of people, that whatever success I've had in my professional life outside of McKinsey is attributable to what I learned at McKinsey for 18 years. And I must be candid, after 18 years of consulting, which was my first and only job, and there was no reason to leave McKinsey. I was doing quite well, and I dare say they were unhappy that I left. Um, and that's a separate story as to why I left. But there is this feeling of trepidation, particularly when you come into a line role, particularly as a CEO, coming from the consulting world, that can you make a difference in the operating world?
Right.
Right? There
Right.
is this big question mark that you've done enough of consulting, but can you really make a difference in the real world? And I've said this to a lot of friends and other people that, it was a relief for me to see that whatever I had learned in McKinsey, when you apply it in the right way to a business problem at Tata AIA or later in my work at AIA, it seems to work. And, it not only worked well, it worked, yeah, I think supremely well for our organization. So I think both in terms of how to solve problems as well as how to work with people, there's a lot that I carried forward from McKinsey. There's a lot that is relevant from that stage of my life to this stage of my life, and I wouldn't be who I am if it weren't for my grounding and all my growth.
Very well said. So one aspect to leadership again, Naveen, is about paying attention to people around you, and enabling them to not mimic or pretend, but to be genuine about who they are. So how do you mentor people? You take up the responsibility of a mentor, and then how do you do that?
Look, I've had the good fortune of having great mentors myself, so you learn from them. So mentors, we at McKinsey we used to call them mentors. In the real world, we call them bosses. So I think whether it has, I would just pick a few names: Leo Puri and Joydeep Sen Gupta at McKinsey. I think Ishad Hussain and Ishad Hussain at the Tata Group, Mark Tucker and Bill Lyle at the AIA Group. More recently, I had a short stint at Axis Bank, and I got an opportunity to work very closely with Amitabh Chaudhary. All these are fabulous people from whom I have learned a lot because in their own way, in their own style, they have mentored me. And I think, therefore, at least I am mentee to a lot of people as well from McKinsey and outside. And I think the role of a mentor is to make sure that you're not trying to mold a person in your own caste, but you're trying to understand really what their strengths are, what they really bring to the table. And my approach to mentorship for my mentees has been forget about what gaps you have. There's a lot of people who come to me and say, okay, I'm very good at A, B, and C, but I don't know how to do D and E. And I'm like, forget it. Right? At some level, fine. If you have big gaps in some areas, you need to plug those. But ultimately, you are who you are because of the strengths you have. So I always look to flip the conversation to say, can we talk about what your big strengths are? And how do you take them to the next and to the next level? And how do you kind of make those strengths distinctive? As opposed to plugging your weaknesses, because at the end of the day you'll only get so much better at that, right? And I think that's something that has worked for me personally, and that is something that I hope has worked for my mentees as well. And to me, truly, that is the way to unleash the power of the people around you. And that's why I go back to the point I made earlier, that when you put a team together, because different people from different backgrounds bring different strengths to the table, and you encourage each one of them to work with their strengths, then I think what you get as a mix is something truly remarkable.
That's really good to know, Naveen. So when we think of CEOs, we typically consider them as inspiring visionaries, or savvy business people, and it's rare to label CEOs as highly engaged who drive coaching style mentorship as well to their employees. So that's good to know from you. What do you do during your free time, Naveen, if any free time that you have?
No, I think it is important to have free time. It's important to have balance in life. I've learned this lesson the hard way, but I have come to realize over the last few years that having time for yourself and your family is very important. What I do in my free time is a whole bunch of things. I read a lot. I am very interested in history and mythology in particular because I think it has, it's good stories. Firstly, it relaxes you, but I think there are some life lessons for personal and professional life in history and mythology. I spend a lot of time with my kids. They are growing up very fast, so it's good to spend time with them, play with them. I run with my older kid nowadays. Play all kinds of stuff with my younger kid. Spend time with my parents who stay with us. So with my wife, of course, who's a rock for me. So I think lots of stuff, but largely around, I would say, my interests at this moment are around history and mythology.
Any lessons that you want to share, Naveen? So from history and mythology that you have embraced.
I think there are so many, right? And I think it's I must say, as an engineering student, you kind of, and before that, as a science student in school, I think you don't appreciate enough what the social sciences have to offer you.
True.
And I think if you look at history, whether global history or Indian history, there are so many lessons for us in professional and personal life. I'll probably narrate two very quickly. I think a few years back, I read the rise of Genghis Khan, who was a Mongol kind of tribal ruler who then, at
Emperor,
that point
right?
of
Yes.
time, in the 1200 AD, built one of the largest empire in the world, which endured for 100 years at least through his three descendants. And in India, of course, we call him Genghis Khan, and in the Western world, he's called Genghis Khan. And if you trace his rise, I think it's a great lesson for what we call continuous improvement in corporate world. So this is the example I always give to some of my colleagues when we talk of continuous improvement, that when you trace how the Mongols actually rose to power, it started with them kind of inventing or using the stirrup and the saddle to ride horses,
Right.
right? And they were the first ones to apply that at scale. So from that starting point, the second thing that they learned is how to shoot a bow and arrow while riding a horse and shoot it reasonably accurately. And the way they would do it is, they would basically start teaching their kids from the time they were 3 years old to ride a horse and shoot a bow and arrow with accuracy while riding a horse at the same time. And these two innovations then allowed them to do things which were impossible for any other army at any point at anywhere else in the world to do, whether it was Chinese armies or whether it was European armies, because with their horses, they would be able to travel distances which were, lightning fast for that era. And they were also kind of able to, use the bow and arrow to attack their enemies from a distance when most of the armies at that point of time were fighting with spears and shields,
Right.
right? So you had a speed advantage, you had a distance advantage. And the other thing that they did, which was the third continuous improvement, is at that point of time, armies would fight as monolithic blocks. There'll be one general, and he will command like thousands of people. But what the Mongols did was what we would call delegation,
Right.
small group delegation, right? They said, okay, we will not fight in thousands, but we will fight in units of tens or twenties. And each leader of that group of 10 or 20 would be empowered to take decisions on the spot in the battlefield in terms of what is right. So, for example, now these are things we talk of in corporate culture, right? We talk about continuous improvement, we talk about delegation, we talk about decision making, we talk about teamwork. And I think these were the things which were at the heart, absolute heart of the rise of one of the largest empires, as I said, in the world. And Genghis Khan and his successors, all the way up to Kublai Khan were anomalies in history, like Alexander was an anomaly as well. So that's one example. The other example I'm very fascinated by is the way the Guptas ran their Indian empire in 300 AD. I'm talking of Chandragupta, and then Samudragupta, and then Vikramaditya, and so on. Because if you look at what they did, it was the golden period of India in many ways. It's called the golden era of the Indian Empire,
True.
and you had terrific advances in science, mathematics, culture, arts, dance, drama. I mean, it's amazing how many ancient scientists, philosophers prospered at that time, right? So, Varamihira, Aryabhatta, Kalidasa, all these names that we are familiar with, it's amazing. They all rose to glory in that same short span of time. And I think if you look at their philosophy was we are a minimalist state. We will do a few things well, right? We will enforce law, we will collect taxes, we will develop some basic infrastructure. But beyond that, it is up to the citizens. And the citizens can do what they want to do without any boundaries, without any prejudices. And we will not say go left and go right. We will let people do what they want to do. And again, I think that's a great lesson for corporate India or corporate world, I would say, to say that I think the corporates need to have some basic framework to enable people and to make sure there's hygiene. But beyond that, particularly in today's era when consumers, technology, digital is evolving so rapidly, I think we have to rely on our people, doing innovation and taking charge of their own destiny rather than waiting for direction from the top to say, okay, tell us what to do.
Very insightful thoughts, Naveen, and the way you have put the analogy both for Genghis Khan and the Maurya period, and how they have worked towards the welfare of the society in a way, both to achieve a common goal, so that's very interesting thoughts.
Just a small correction, Ashwini. The Gupta period,
The Gupta
which
period,
was
I'm
it
sorry.
was 300 AD,
Right.
Maurya period was 300 BC.
I'm sorry.
And just one other just interesting anecdote because I'm a history buff. So Chandragupta Maurya and his immediate successor Bindusar
Bindusar.
were of the same mindset as um, as the Guptas later on. But Ashoka, who came right after them, was of a different mindset. So there is this. You will hear this word in history: Chanakyan state versus Ashokan state.
Right.
So the Guptas were actually more a Chanakyan state, which is what I described. The Ashokan state is a little different. It is like much more, directive in terms of what you do. And that's why you will find a lot of edicts from Ashoka across different parts of the country, right? All the way from west in Pakistan to east in Sarnath, you will find the relics of a lot of edicts from Ashoka because he had a different style. He was much more top down than either his predecessors or later the Gupta Empire.
Gupta Empire. Right. Right. Apart from the corporate mandate, Naveen, do you have a personal goal, a mission, that something that you would want to achieve once you hang your boots?
Personal goal at this moment in my life, I must be candid with you, is to get back to fitness so that I can run the half marathon again whenever it starts, whenever
Oh,
we have Mumbai Marathon starting up again. I used to be a very avid runner. And then I suffer from a genetic disorder. So I have had a very tough few years. But now I'm getting my health back and I'm starting to run again. I'm now running up to 40 minutes at a stretch. I still run like an old man. I run very slowly right now. But the idea is to build my fitness back. I don't have any personal goals beyond that. I think, in personal life, my only goal is to make sure that I have a circle of friends and family that I can, spend time with and be happy. Beyond that, I don't think I could care much about how life goes.
right. It has been a pleasure speaking with you, Naveen. Thank you for taking us through your journey, your sources of inspiration and lessons that you've learned over the years.
Thank you, Ashwini. Pleasure to talk to you.